Welcome back, everybody. In today's episode of Cooking with Kirby, we're going to be trimming a brisket. Now, trimming brisket can be intimidating. And my first brisket, I was so intimidated, I just ended up separating the point and the flat because I didn't know what to do with it. And some of the tips that I share with you guys, I hope it, helps you along with your cooking journey. And we're going to break down on how to trim it, how to season it, and get it ready for the smoker. And that's coming up. When you usually buy a Packard brisket like this, it's usually just vacuum sealed, nothing trimmed. You got to do all the work. I mean, there's so much fat on this brisket that we're going to be trimming up. Now, for the knife I like to use to trim a brisket is a deboning knife. The reason why, because it's flexible and it allows you to get into little sections and be able to bend your blade and be able to make the perfect cut. So to open the brisket, we're just going to puncture the plastic just a tad bit, but you want to lift up because you do not want your blade to cut your brisket. It cuts really easy on the meat. So that way you don't damage or make any weird cuts on the brisket. Just go ahead and just run your knife upwards and just open up the package. Now, I've had the brisket in the freezer for probably about an hour, close to an hour. The fat is still pretty hard, and that's kind of something you want because if you have warm fat makes it a little difficult for you to trim. So you kind of want the fat to be nice and firm, so the colder the better. Now you have two pieces of meat here. You have the point over here, and then you have the flat, which is all right here. And those two pieces of meat are connected by this seam fat right here. So we're going to be actually removing that. And also, depending on what side of the cow that's on, you'll have this right here. That is, it's discolored because they cut it with a saw, the carcass in half. So it's kind of like it cooked it a little bit. So we're going to be removing that also. All right, you want to make sure that your knife is as sharp as possible. It'll make this a lot easier for you. Okay, so right about here, it seems like the start of that seam. So kind of make like a little cut right here. And then we'll come down to about where you want it to end. So we're gonna cut off about to right here. So go ahead and just follow along that line, that imaginary line. Get your hand in there. There we go. So now you could see where the muscles are. This right here is going to get removed. We're going to remove this down. Trim up some of the fat that's on here on the back. Okay, so let's go on to the other side. Okay, so when it comes to this top fat, depending on the butcher, it really depends how it comes out from the manufacturer, the processing plant. So this one looks like it has a real thin layer on the top. What you're trying to go for is a quarter of an inch of fat right on top. See this first part right here, I'm pretty much gonna have to take some of this and put it there to kind of patch it up. I'm actually probably gonna trim this up. This is discolored for some reason, but it'll cook up. It'll make some good eats. So with the fat being cold, you could pull back and just trim off a little as you go. Now this part right here, this is really thin. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim probably about right here. We're gonna cut to about right here. So if you could tell right here, this is a real small piece. This isn't gonna last a 12-hour cook compared to say something this size. Now that little piece isn't gonna cook too well, so we're gonna trim the back of that just a tad bit. Probably trim up just about right here. Okay, so this right here is not too pretty. We're gonna go ahead and make a cut. So this is why I like using a deboning knife. So I could kind of more or less guide my knife where I'm gonna put it, and so that way I know exactly how much fat I'm gonna be taking out right here. You wanna go little by little. So
now the first top portion of that fat was really hard. Now that wouldn't render down, but the more you get closer inside this little fat piece right here, that fat actually does melt. So you want to go ahead and just trim just a little bit of that, but it's okay to leave a little bit of the fat in there because it will render down.
now for this ugly part right here, we're gonna go ahead and just kind of trim this. This is the same stuff that as the cow got, you know, the carcass got cut in half. Just gonna trim the top of this off. It's not gonna cook well. It's gonna, you know, basically flake off when you cook it. So it's not gonna be any good for your presentation. I mean, if you're not really going for presentation, you know, you can go ahead and leave it on there. But yeah, it's not gonna cook well. I mean, it's pretty much already cooked meat because, you know, the heat from the saw, the blade of the saw, that's what discolors it. This part right here, this is not the point. This is some other type of meat. And actually you can find a seam in here where those two pieces of meat actually connect.
Sometimes that little piece of meat is bigger, sometimes it's smaller. This is probably the biggest I see it. This is a 21-pound brisket, so it is kind of big. But there's gonna be a seam between the point and that weird piece of meat that's connected. So you just kind of want to find it, and then as you see, it's basically two pieces of meat that are separated between a layer of, like, a lining of fat. You basically just pull back the meat and you just, you know, trim away.
See how you have this meat right here that's going this way and this crazy meat going this way? Those are two different muscles there. Now I know not everybody's gonna work at a beef plant like I did, but I mean, I didn't learn this type of butchering, but I mean, just the knowing of, you know, basic butchering, you know, from what the cuts I did. I didn't work brisket. I worked the loin line long time ago. If I had a hook, I'd be able to pull back on this a little bit better. So for just presentation purposes, we're gonna go ahead and just trim this up. We want it kind of round.
Now for this side of the brisket, it really depends up to you. There's some people that love to do a super trim and have this completely trimmed out. Now this fat, you don't really have to worry about it. It will render down. I've cooked briskets and left some of this fat on there, and it does render down. It doesn't affect your cook at all. But just go ahead and trim up some of the excess spots, especially, you know, the big pieces you see right there. But leaving a little bit of that behind is not going to hurt your cook. Now for this portion right here, I don't like to get briskets that have that, but fortunately for you guys get to see it and see exactly what I do with it. That somehow it got discolored by either a hot something or it was ran through some type of machine. It touched some machine, so that's why it's discolored like that. So we're gonna go ahead and trim that out, and what I'm going to do to remedy that is I'm going to be putting some of the fat that we trim right there to protect it. So for the fat on top, you want to leave 1/4 of an inch of fat. Now you want to get to those big thick parts that you can see how much fat you have and just start trimming them. On some spots like this one has some really thin spots. Just be really careful, and if you actually, you know, cut too much to the meat, you can actually patch it up with a piece of fat. Once you have the top cap trimmed to about 1/4 of an inch thick, now we're going to check for spots around the brisket that are not going to last a very long cook.
So this little flap right here, it's not gonna cook, so we kind of want this to kind of just round off, just shape our brisket. This right here, it's just gonna just dry up and get burnt. Got still that little fat piece right here. There we go. Okay, so this right here, this is another, you know, fat that you're going to want to trim. Now we're going to take out just a tad bit of this, not a whole lot, because it does hold some structure to the brisket. You know, just get in there with your tip. Okay, now see the difference in the fat. This is that pillowy fat. Go ahead and trim a little bit more of this over here. Still got some of that nasty pink red fat that I don't like. Expose some more of that pillowy fat, so that way it'll still hold its structural integrity. But you can get rid of this. A lot of people, what they do is they'll just separate the muscles between this and just, you know, take out all the fat.
Now for the two corners on the flat, you want to trim those up a little bit. You want to make those kind of like aerodynamic. Now the points like that, they're not going to cook good. Basically they're going to burn up on you and they're going to dry out really quick. So just kind of make it aerodynamic.
I think for the most part, besides this ugly part that's annoying me, but I can't do nothing about it, this looks pretty good. So let's give it a season. All right, for seasoning. Now you can season brisket whatever the hell you want to put on there. I'm not lying. You can put whatever you want on there. But for me, I like these three right here. Just coarse black pepper, coarse kosher salt, and garlic powder.
Now, if you want to go traditional Texas style brisket, all you need is equal parts of coarse black pepper and coarse kosher salt. That is Texas right there. So if you're looking to do Texas style barbecue, this is all you need.
So equal parts salt and pepper and half part garlic powder.
So what I like to do is I like to measure out 1 cup of coarse black pepper, 1 cup of coarse kosher salt, and a half of a cup of granulated garlic powder. And then this is my seasoning. I use it for a lot of things beef.
All right, just give this a mix. Now, like I said, you could use any pre-made seasoning you have. I mean, there's so many seasonings out there. You don't have to use this on brisket. So I'm gonna bottle this up. This is all mixed up, and we'll season up our brisket. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start with the bottom first. This is a big piece of meat. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and give a binder of some mustard, just to get everything to stick together. Now this ain't gonna give a mustard flavor, to say. It's just gonna give, you know, allow the seasoning to stick. So you wanna go ahead and just, you know, give it a rub with that mustard all over, just to kind of make it tacky. Give a nice coating of that seasoning that we just whipped up. Now you don't have to over season. You know, just because it's a big piece of meat doesn't mean you have to put a whole lot. Let's go ahead and pat that in. But you know what? When you let brisket sit in the fridge for overnight, oh my God, the smell is just beautiful. Okay, go ahead and get some of this. Kind of pat that in. So when I do the sides, just kind of just catch it with your hand. Any spots you feel, kind of bounces off of your glove too. Same thing with this side. Kind of just catch it in your glove and it bounces off. And just, you know, give it a pat. Now this little back piece right here. But if you want to keep it traditional, you know, just salt and pepper is how they do it in Texas. Now, those little spots that were kind of like wrecked from the manufacturer, the processing plant, kind of went ahead and just patched that up with some of the fat that we trimmed up. So the same thing, we're gonna go ahead and get a little binder right here on top. Since we already have the sides pretty much done, we're gonna just focus really right here on the top and just check for if we missed any spots. I like to focus on half of the meat that I'm seasoning at a time. That way you can kind of get the seasoning right there. That way you know what it's gonna look like. You know, if you try to do this whole thing in a rotation, you're gonna miss spots, so. I think it looks pretty good. We got a pretty good trim on it. Couldn't do nothing with that. The issues from the processing plant, it is what it is, and that's just something that you have to deal with. Especially these cheap briskets. I picked this one up at Walmart. Next one I'll probably pick up from Costco just to, you know, see how those are. But this looks pretty good. So we're gonna go ahead and put this on a rack and I'm gonna place this in the fridge. I hope some of those tricks and tips helped you. It can be intimidating, and it's just part of the process, but once you get a little bit of practice in, it's not that hard. And once you become more familiar with the meat, then you understand what's where, and pretty much just have fun with it. You know, my first couple cooks of brisket weren't all that great. You know, they were tough, they just didn't come out right. I didn't know what I was doing. That was probably about 12, 13 years ago. But yeah, the more practice that you have with it, the more fun it becomes. If you're new to my channel, consider hitting the subscribe button. That way you can see future videos just like this. I have these recipes, they're really good. You should try them out. Now y'all be beautiful and take care.